Good evening, this is Viewpoint. I'm Zakka. Jacob, big announcement by the Prime Minister just in the past 1 hour. Starting the 21st of June, Monday, which is International Day of Yoga, the central government will be procuring all vaccines that are required for citizens in this country and will be providing those vaccines free of cost to states. So 75% of all vaccines that will be procured in the country will be done only by the central government. A remaining 25% will be reserved for private hospitals. But the state quota, which was 25%, which was allocated for states from the 1st of May till the 21st of June, that will cease to exist from the 21st of June. And the reason why they've gone back to this earlier policy, implicit in this, is an admission of failure by the states who tried to go out there and procure vaccines for different states and citizens in different states by floating global tenders. Implicit in today's announcement is a failure by state governments, various state governments, and there's no political bias here. BJP and opposition ruled state governments tried to go to the global market and tried to procure vaccines, but they failed. So we've had a month of really a confusing vaccination policy. Hopefully that will change from the 21st of June. Let's take you through the big 4 points that the Prime Minister made in his speech that was televised about an hour ago. The entire nation watching it with rapt attention. Here are the 4 big points. Number 1, the central government will now take charge of all procurement of vaccines. The system that existed from the 16th of January when we began vaccination across the country from healthcare workers and frontline workers, senior citizens, and then eventually to 45 plus and then 18 to 45, that centralized system will continue. 75% of all the vaccines that will be procured by the central government. There will be no procurement by the state governments. In fact, the state governments will get all their vaccine from the central government free of cost starting the 21st of June. Also, the remaining 25% will be kept with private hospitals, but there is a cap of 150 rupees of service charge. So whatever they procure it at, they cannot charge 150 rupees more than the procurement charge for the private hospital. So big announcement. Let's listen in to what the Prime Minister said, and then we will go to our guests.
ये निर्णय लिया गया है कि राज्यों के पास वैक्सीनेशन से जुड़ा जो 25% काम था, उसकी जिम्मेदारी भी भारत सरकार उठाएगी। ये व्यवस्था आने वाले 2 सप्ताह में लागू की जाएगी। इन 2 सप्ताह में केंद्र और राज्य सरकारें मिलकर नई गाइडलाइंस के अनुसार आवश्यक तैयारी कर लेगी। 21 जून सोमवार से देश के हर राज्य में 18 वर्ष से ऊपर की उम्र के सभी नागरिकों के लिए भारत सरकार राज्यों को मुफ्त वैक्सीन मुहैया कराएगी।
All right, so implicit in today's decision is an admission of failure, or an acknowledgement of failure certainly, by the state governments who back in April had this huge clamor, let us go procure, decentralize the process, why should the central government control everything? They tried for a month and a half and realized that no foreign vaccine manufacturer wants to deal with states. They all want to deal with a federal government or with a central government, and that's why we're now going back to the policy that existed before the 1st of May, where all procurement was done by the center. Let me now bring in our guest, Charu Pragya, spokesperson of the BJP, Dr. Anshul Avijit, spokesperson of the Congress Party. Abhijit Majumdar is founder and editor-in-chief of the audio platform Earshot.in, and Dr. Sanjeev Bagai is chairman of Nephron Clinic. Anshul, I'll start with you because let's face it, the states made a huge clamor. There was a huge chorus, allow us to procure, allow us to procure. They all tried, and this is irrespective of political differences. BJP states tried, opposition-ruled states tried, and they all came to the same conclusion that no company wants to sell to states. They only want to deal with the central government, and now the center is going back to the pre-May 1 policy as it existed for procurement. Isn't this an implicit admission of the failure of state governments to do what they all clamored for back in the middle of April?
Quite the contrary, Zakka. This is not about the states at all. This is actually implicit admission by the central government of their failure. I mean, what really struck me with this very unstatesmanlike and crude speech by the Prime Minister, entirely vicious and politicized, was that you started this policy because of your lack of orders, because you had a dearth of vaccines. You began this symbolic policy. You started this kind of state sort of vaccine Darwinism, where you unleashed a perverse competition between the states because you had a dearth of vaccines in the first place. And now you suddenly reverse the order and you think that this is a moment of triumph for you, where you're restoring this kind of
but Anshul, but on whose request was that? No, Anshul, on whose request was the policy decentralized? If I remember, Chief Ministers from Uddhav Thackeray to Arvind Kejriwal had all written to the Prime Minister saying decentralize your policy. That's why they changed the policy. Let's not conveniently forget that, right?
Prime Minister doesn't listen to anyone, nor does this government. We've been asking for a repeal of the laws of CAA. Have they listened? Do you think that this Prime Minister would listen to the states?
Those are different matters. Let's stick to the vaccine procurement. Let's stick to the vaccine procurement.
No, I'll stick to the vaccine procurement.
Didn't opposition-ruled chief ministers from Uddhav Thackeray to Arvind Kejriwal to Mamata Banerjee write to the Prime Minister saying, allow us to go procure? Did they or did they not?
The Congress policy on vaccination, Zakka, was unequivocal. It was there should be a free universal vaccine process. This was there right from the beginning. No state leader of the Congress party or any other policy say that hand over this complex, convoluted, perverse, competitive policy that we have to deal with. Now that he's suddenly taken it back in a moment of triumph.
Let me ask Charu Pragya, because if I remember right, I think even Mr. Rahul Gandhi had written to the Prime Minister saying decentralize the policy. But be that as it may, what we got net as a consequence of this decentralized policy is a month and a half of wasted time. There was confusion. There was confusion around who is procuring how much, at what price is it being sold. And basically also we got a month and a half of a very, very slow vaccine drive. That's what we've got net. Charu Pragya.
Zakka, I want to begin by thanking our Prime Minister Modi ji for now ensuring that every single adult Indian is going to be vaccinated free of charge, and the responsibility is going to solely lie upon the central government. And this also comes along with this rider for private hospitals that if people can pay for their vaccines, they will not be charged any more than 150 rupees plus the price of the acquisition of the vaccine. And this has come at a fantastic time. Yes. I've been hearing the arguments put forth by my co-panelists from Congress, and all sorts of fancy language cannot take away one truth. When the entire state clamors and talks about a federal structure, when the entire country talks about saying that there's too much of centralization, give us more control, the Prime Minister heard you and did exactly that. But seeing the chaos the country has been thrown in recent times, and the way certain state governments have taken to name-calling our Prime Minister for every single failure of theirs, the Prime Minister had to take this step for the welfare of our people, for the welfare of our country. He has already explained the number of vaccines which India is producing.
No, but Charu, can I just ask you though? Can I just ask you? There seems to be another player. No, one second, Charu. There is another player involved in this, last month and a half of this back and forth that's been going on between centre and states, and that happens to be the Supreme Court. And you remember in the last hearing, the Supreme Court called the vaccination policy arbitrary and irrational, and this price differential should end. So why shouldn't the opposition look at this and say, basically the central government is now correcting course only because the Supreme Court had those words to say?
Zakka, first of all, why did the Supreme Court even have to step in for something like this if there was no misappropriation of vaccines? And the last few days, we've seen endless news clips coming from states like Punjab, coming from places in Rajasthan where there has been a massive amount of vaccine wastage, and God knows for what reason. For Delhi, I can give you RTI figures, more than 1.5 lakh vaccines have gone missing. Nobody knows where these vaccines went and who received them and who did not, or whether they were also thrown into the dustbin like they were in the state of Punjab. So the truth is that, in the state of Rajasthan, the truth is that there was so much mismanagement by the states because they just wanted the collective efforts to fail that the Supreme Court had to step in. And of course, the government keeps its ears to the ground. The government is going to ensure it takes a
let me go
stand
to
for
Abhijit
what is
Majumdar
right
and
for
to
the
Dr.
people of the
Sanjeev
country.
Bagai. Dr. Bagai, I'll come to you first because you're an expert on this. This whole idea of procurement by state governments. Now, you can argue whether it was done at the behest of state governments or at the request or under the pressure and the clamor by state governments. Certainly in the middle of April, Chief Minister after Chief Minister was writing to the centre saying, decentralize, decentralize, we'll go out and procure. And by the middle of May, all state governments, and again, there is no politics here, this is BJP ruled states as well as opposition ruled states, realize that foreign companies don't want to deal with state governments. This policy was a disastrous idea, whether it was under pressure from state governments or whether, I don't know why the centre decided to change the policy, but, we should have gone by the example of other countries. It's not like in the US, Texas is going and procuring from one company and California is procuring from somebody else, or in the UK, London is procuring from one company and Yorkshire and Southampton are procuring from somewhere else. We had the example of other countries where everywhere only one agency, which is the federal government or a central government, was procuring vaccines and then providing that to various stakeholders. In the case of the US, they were providing it to pharmaceutical companies, to medical shops, to universities, along with state governments. And that should have been how the vaccine rollout should have happened.
Good evening,
Dr.
Zakka.
Bagai.
Good evening, everyone. I think COVID will not bring India down, but I think bad politics will bring India down. So my only humble request to all the opposition parties is please play with us, bat with us, fight with us, not against us. Just as an honest Indian citizen, the words used by one of the panelists of convoluted, perverse, I think are totally misplaced. Coming to the vaccine policy per se, I think the policy should be centralized. The pricing should be uniformed in state and central. India is not US. US has hoarded almost 54% of the global stockpile with some other countries, and 83% of the vaccines done globally are in the 5 countries. So it's a complete inequitable distribution what they are following. But having said that, India is one amongst the only 5 countries which has homegrown, manufactured Indian vaccines. So I think it's kudos to the scientists and researchers. But the vaccine rollout now from 21st June being free, excellent. Centralized, excellent. Pushing to aggressively get more number of vaccine companies and platforms on board, excellent. I think after a long patient game for the last, say 45 odd days, I think this is a move in the correct direction. I find it appropriate. This is the time now to push it. And I'm quite sure in another 2 months, we would be reaching the figures which we are looking to feel. Maybe by end of the year, we will reach a figure which will give us a significant portion of herd immunity.
That's what we are hoping, and the government's promise is 216 crore vaccines between August and December. But I want to go to Abhijit Majumdar because I doubt if the politics on this is going to end anytime soon. I suspect, and correct me if I'm wrong, Abhijit, the way the politics has been playing so far, like I said, in April, all states wanted decentralized procurement. In May, they went in and tried to procure from global companies. They all realized very quickly that that's not happening. And then, again, by the end of May, early June, all state governments and all chief ministers were writing, central procurement, free vaccines, central procurement, free vaccines. Now what is going to happen once you have central procurement and free vaccines, and I suspect if the supplies are going to be, still limited as they were in May, and you're not going to suddenly get a spurt of vaccines, in the next few weeks, you're going to go back to the politics of, Gujarat is getting more vaccines, Kerala is getting less, Bengal is getting less, but Uttar Pradesh is getting more. So the politics, I'm afraid, and I'd be happy to be corrected, the politics, I'm afraid, will continue.
Zakka, I agree with both you and Dr. Bagai. This is, we have seen for the last 3 or 4 traumatic months that alongside the deaths and the devastation, there has been terrible politics at play as well. I mean, constant changing of goalposts. See, Mr. Modi made it very clear in his speech that the central government was surprised. I mean, he said that the vaccinations were on course when the second wave came, and he practically admitted that the government was overwhelmed and then started preparing for the new scenario, etc., etc. Now opposition, after a very, very long time, had got a handle, unfortunately, in this very, very, tragic pandemic. Opposition got its first proper handle against the government, which actually resonates in, among the people. Before that, from Rafale to even the farm laws, it was just restricted to a very, very small this thing. In the farm laws, the protests are restricted to practically one state. But with this, the opposition sensed opportunity. There was some extremely dirty politics played, including promoting vaccine hesitancy. And now Mr. Modi, being a very astute politician himself, has chosen, the time which he feels is right, where he is feeling confident that the vaccinations and the vaccine supplies are on, are in a very manageable position. That he has come out and addressed the nation, and he has attacked the section of the media and a section of the opposition on on being so negative and spreading lies and vaccine hesitancy, etc. But tell me something. For somebody who has lost a dear one, a father, mother, wife, child, lover, friend, whoever, who does that person blame?
Correct.
Who has the accountability for this? Somewhere the system failed, right? So while we attack and we defend ourselves, somewhere, it would be, I think it's too much to expect from our politics, that people would also start taking accountability and admitting that we screwed up. So if, that is something that needs to happen, I feel. The second is the Prime Minister's speech could have, he could have made some announcements on the economy front, because that is paramount now. With the vaccines rolling out, by the millions, and also people who have a large part of the population has already gone through COVID. So a certain sort of immunity is going to kick in, and things are going to open up. But how is the economy going to come back? I think that is, something that we need to sort of, that could have been.
I guess yes. I mean, you're right. You're right. It's a bridge we need to cross. But I guess I don't know if today is the bridge. Today is the time to cross that bridge. But anyway, be that as it may, I want to go back to the political spokespersons. Let me go back to Anshul Avijit. Anshul, again, nobody is asking for the opposition to admit that you got this policy wrong. But this whole clamor is the reason why the policy was decentralized. And not only did the decentralization of the policy happen, but it led to a month and a half of a very slow vaccine drive. How do you explain, Anshul, that we were doing 40 lakhs plus in the first part of April, and then suddenly by May, when it was opened up, we went down to 20 lakhs and on some days 15 lakhs?
Zakka, I would urge you not to buy into the propaganda of the speech, because the Prime Minister is blaming the opposition. Essentially, the states is just a euphemism for the opposition, and that too for the Congress. Do not buy into that. This was a politically vicious speech of the usual platitudes and the tropes of empathy were also missing here. It was just a vicious speech. The opposition party, let me remind you, Zakka, wanted a centralized procurement and a decentralized distribution. Decentralized distribution never meant a decentralized procurement. I don't know where that has come in. Yes, we wanted autonomy because the center was doing a terrible
one
job.
second. What do you mean by decentralized distribution? What do you mean by decentralized distribution? Even now, the job of putting the jab onto arms of people is still being managed by states, right? And also, I mean, isn't it rather convenient, Anshul, that you got one set of guys procuring the vaccine for you free of cost, but you want to take the credit for it?
It's the same country, Zakka. It's not one set of guys. The center is responsible and duty bound, particularly after enforcing the Disaster Management Act. They wanted a particular freedom. And by the way, the state wanted to be stakeholders in the process of distribution. Put them, consult with them, have a consultative mechanism. But you know, Zakka, the important point is I'm glad you got in the Supreme Court, because actually it was a searing and brutal critique of the central government by the Supreme Court, starting from a month and a half back. And, even before they called the Supreme Court's vaccine policy irrational and arbitrary, before they said that it was a clear violation of Article 21, Article 14, and Article 21 of the Constitution. The high courts have been exemplary in their critique.
Okay.
And that somehow has got, so the auditing of the executive by the courts.
Charu, respond. Yeah, Charu, respond to that. Charu, respond to that.
So, Zakka, it is really unfortunate that the Indian opposition does not understand that there are certain times in life when you do need to unite and you need to put being an Indian above being a congressman. And it's apparent in the way Anshul has been criticizing the Prime Minister's speech today. In fact, I think you should be very happy. All your states actually top the list of vaccine wastage. There has been a very, very big reveal of what has gone on in the state of Rajasthan in recent times. The chief minister is unapologetic. He actually comes on television and he says, Jo hua so hua. That is not the way you're supposed to be treating precious vaccines. There are people who are waiting for this all around the world, not simply in India. And because you happen to be from a country which is privileged enough to produce its own vaccine, I would suggest don't sit on a high horse like this. But coming down to the basics of things, Zakka, now,
Charu, can I ask you? No, since you mentioned this, one second. I have an interjection. I have an interjection on that point. One second. I will give you 10 seconds. But I have an interjection on that point. I also saw that story. It was put out by a leading newspaper today. About 9 states, and primarily opposition states, where underutilization of vaccines is happening. I have 2 questions to ask you. Number 1, is underutilization not happening in BJP ruled states? Because I find that quite surprising, number 1. And number 2, even now, after this new policy will take into effect from the 21st of June, how will you ensure that states don't waste vaccines or states don't underutilize vaccines? Because ultimately, the job, like I said, the job of putting the jab into people's arms is still going to be managed by state governments, not by the central government.
Absolutely. So, Zakka, that is what I was coming to. I was going to say exactly that, because now when the states will have more vaccines in their hand, and as production is going to increase in India, foreign vaccines will come in, foreign vaccines will start to be produced here in India. We have to be very, very diligent and ensure that we use every single dose as much as possible. Let's not waste vaccines at a time like this. But coming down to the politics of vaccination, now imagine a situation of the government where all the states are writing to the Prime Minister saying decentralize, and if the Prime Minister doesn't, you will damn him. And if the Prime Minister listens to you and says, okay, let's play by your rules, and if you think you can do it better, go right ahead.
We are in his eternal debt, Charu. We are deeply obligated.
The Prime Minister had never left responsibility. Anshul, 50% of the vaccines were still being acquired by the central government and distributed free of charge. Please do not speak over me. I'm trying to make a point here. So in India, till now, 23 crore Indians have been vaccinated, and all these vaccines which were acquired by the state government central government were given to the states free of charge. So it's not like the central government was shirking responsibilities, but the responsibilities you asked for, you begged for, you could not handle. So obviously the government has stepped in again and
so I think one of the things that will also get addressed, I think, and I'll give Dr. Bagai the final word. I think one of the concerns that will be addressed is the kind of example that we saw in Punjab, for example, where state was procuring at 400 rupees and state was selling to private hospitals at 1,000 rupees, and then private hospitals were selling it to individuals at 1,500 rupees. Hopefully, stuff like that will not happen from the 1st of June, because it's going to be one procurement, and that one agency, which is the central government, will directly provide to the state governments.
Yes, Zakka, I think very clearly our next 6 months of our vaccine rollout and our combined effort will define our next 10 years. And my only humble request and prayers with folded hands to all the opposition parties is to stay together, fight together. This kind of mudslinging is not going to get us anywhere. I think whatever the government is doing, let us stand with the government, let us fight this out. Vaccine wastage, vaccine hesitancy, dumping vaccines into dustbin and trying to bury them, throwing away vials or fictitiously trying to give vaccines which you are not giving. This is a crime against humanity. The vaccines globally are in a huge shortage at the present moment. Please appreciate that there are some countries which have just hoarded them on, which is completely bizarre. But at the present moment, with the new vaccines rolling out, I'm quite certain that we will be able to achieve our target. Maybe a month or two later, but I think we all need to be together. Let's not criticize the government just because we are in opposition. Please, we have lost a lot of close family members. We've lost over 1,000 doctors. We've lost more than a couple of lakhs human beings in India. We are all Indians first. Please, I'm begging everyone, please be with us.
I want to give Abhijit Majumdar the final word, and I think the critical X factor, whether center is procuring or states are procuring, private hospitals are procuring, the critical X factor is we are only going to come out of this dire situation, go up to 50 lakh vaccinations a day. You know, we can even amp up to 75, maybe even 1 crore vaccinations a day, only if there is going to be adequate supply. Are you hopeful that there will be adequate supply and that we can meet the centre's rather ambitious target of 216 crore vaccine doses by the end of the year?
I don't know. I'm not in the middle of the entire, massive inventory management, Zakka. I mean, none of us are. But what gives me confidence is that I trust our Prime Minister's political instinct. He wouldn't have chosen a time to come out with this kind of a speech if he were not confident that the vaccines are rolling out very, very fast, and and that he could sort of turn the heat back onto the opposition. Well, this is politics, but I think given by his timing, I would think that something positive is happening.
Okay, I'll just wrap up with a final word, and I'm really hoping that once this centralized procurement, which is how it should have always been, every country which has successfully vaccinated a bulk of its people, US, UK, take any other country, Germany, they've all had centralized procurement. So this policy is the right one, and I hope that the central government is firm on this, and I really hope and pray that once that centralized procurement once again kicks in from the 21st of June, we don't have instances of states coming out and saying, oh, Maharashtra is getting less, Gujarat is getting more, or UP is getting more, and Bengal is getting less. Because the last thing we need right now is politics between states, politics between center and states on who is getting more and who is getting less. Ultimately, we need every adult Indian vaccinated. That's our only hope, and that's our only weapon, shield against COVID-19. Thank you very much to all our guests. I'll catch you again at 9 o'clock with Brass Tacks. Shivani will be joining you right on the other side.